What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today is indeed Wednesday, which means the new summit is now live. And of course, that also means we're getting a chance to get the lovely Bugatti Magma Edition again. I also have to admit, by the way, I'm not 100% sure on why they actually picked this Bugatti. I actually thought something like the Emerald Storm most likely would have been a better option. And of course, when that car came out back in the day, it was going to be the top 3000. So it obviously was going to be a very old car, but I guess you have to admit, at least you can get a choice to get this car again. Do keep in mind though, if you already own this vehicle, you're most likely going to get around 100,000 bucks and most likely a 10-piece McNugget because it does not give you any money whatsoever. But looking at the summit though, we're also going to have a couple surprises. So the first thing I do want to mention though is I am going to do all 6 of the main events in first person view or cockpit view basically the entire time I do them. And I have to admit, by the way, it really does make the summit a lot more entertaining. And of course, on the back end, it's probably going to be a bit more difficult. But we also have one hypercar event on the top left here. And of course, the rest of the other 5 events are going to be Street Tier 2. And then moving over to the first skill is going to be the Bullseye. So for this one, you will actually have to use a plane on it. Do not worry though, because it is not going to be nearly as bad as I thought. Do keep in mind, by the way, in the bullseyes, you have to aim for the tiny green circle to get the most points possible. Also, I do want to mention, by the way, if you are wondering what plane should I run, without a doubt in my mind, guys, use the Slick 360 HP, which is easily going to be my go-to plane, not only for the skills, but also for basically every single plane event. Like, the Slick aircraft is by far going to be that good, which, by the way, you can easily run a plane in this entire event if you would like to. I have to admit, though, I did end up starting this event in a Demolition Derby car, which, by the way, as long as you have a score breaker set, you can run any of them. Do keep in mind, once you actually switch into the plane, you can then switch back into a car for the road part of this entire skill. I have to admit, though, staying in a plane after you do switch into it does seem to be a bit easier. And then, of course, moving over to the next skill is going to be a buoy smashing, which I have to admit is probably going to be one of the easiest buoy smashes I have ever done in like any game ever. And I also mean that by doing them back in the Crew 2 before. I basically then decided to pretty much drive around and take my sweet time in this entire buoy smashing. And I did manage to get 74,000 points in it. Of course, using the lovely Proto WR1. Which, by the way, I would definitely recommend trying out this boat for this. Even that, though, managed to get me 156,927 points. So I would say, though, the biggest thing about this buoy smashing is most likely going to come down to the fact that, well, you luckily do not have to get 100,000 points to get a high score. And then, of course, moving over to the last skill is going to be the escape. So for this one, you will indeed have to use a hypercar. I would say that's most likely going to be pretty shocking, right? Yeah, no. But I would say, though, the Bugatti Dici is probably going to be the #1 used vehicle on this. And I could say that for good reasoning, like that car is incredible. But of course, I did end up running the Lamborghini Countach once again. Which, by the way, the biggest thing about this escape is most likely going to come down to the AI. There is going to be a lot of blind corners on that lovely highway run. And of course, if there is going to be an AI there, they are easily going to get in the way of that perfect run. And then moving over to the first event here is going to be with the lovely Bugatti Magma Edition. Do keep in mind, by the way, I once again ran all 6 of the main events in first-person view, which, by the way, I would recommend trying that out, like it is going to be a pretty dang fun time doing it. Do keep in mind, by the way, it is going to be a vehicle loan type of event, so you cannot change the pro settings on this vehicle. You also cannot add any of the main part sets to the car either, so it is basically going to come down to like the overall driving skill on it, which, by the way, I have to admit, this is going to be a pretty fun but short event, doing around 4 laps around that track. And then moving over to the next event is, of course, going to be with the Lamborghini Huracán, which, by the way, this car does not belong in this event whatsoever, but at the same time, it's also going to make it a lot more fun that way, which, by the way, the Lamborghini Huracan is probably going to be one of the best Street Tier 2 vehicles in this entire game. I do find this kind of funny because this car was insanely underrated back in the Crew 2, but now this thing is also going to be insanely good now. I also have to admit, by the way, with this car driving off-road and on beaches in this event, it also does give me hope that we actually see the lifted Lamborghini in the future. And then, of course, moving over to the next event is going to be with the Challenger SRT Demon. This thing is also going to be a pretty crazy car. By the way, this is a fairly long event, which, if you are wondering, is going to be around 6 minutes to complete it. I also have to admit, by the way, the SRT Demon is not the best handling vehicle out there. Is it going to be the worst? I would probably say no, but it is definitely not going to be the best one either. Do keep in mind, if you were driving the Huracán right before this event, that car is definitely going to feel a lot lighter than this one. Of course, the Dodge Challenger also has a weird reputation to be a boat, and it does kind of feel like that around corners, but if you are running manual, by the way, a big tip I can give on this event is to put that car in an extra gear coming out of the corner. That way you can actually hit the nitrous and have a lot more speed, which of course is going to make you a lot quicker. And then moving over to the next event is going to be with the lovely Nissan GT-R Nismo. Do keep in mind, by the way, the biggest thing about this event is by far going to come down to those corners. The GT-R is going to be a great all-around car with some pretty nice acceleration, but at least getting around those corners really is going to help with that overall time. And then for the next event, you will have to use a Dodge of your choice. For this, I would definitely recommend running the Dodge Viper SRT10 GTS, and of course the lovely Lightning Edition on top of it. Surprisingly, the Viper GTS is a very stable vehicle. I have to admit, by the way, I basically never ran this car before, and I pretty much never used this car back in the Crew 2 either, so running this thing in this game was actually a pretty nice change of pace, and I have to admit, I will be running this car more in the future. And then of course for the final event here in this summit, you can use a European vehicle of your choice. For this, I would say you're probably going to see a very big pattern of the lovely Huracán. And of course, you're most likely going to see the Porsche Taycan Turbo S, which I can easily admit, by the way, the Taycan Turbo S and the Huracán are by far the best options for it. But of course, I did not want to pick the best options for the event. That is probably going to make no sense whatsoever. But for me, though, I did want to use the Porsche 911 Carrera 4S Timeless Edition, which, by the way, I have been running the Timeless Edition pretty often in the recent summits. I wouldn't say this is going to be the best Street Tier 2 vehicle, but it's definitely not going to be the worst by any means. Overall, though, I would say a lot of players are going to like this summit, but if you guys have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. Let's jump right into this.